And we see up there the ISO classification. Starting this year, when you look at your TCNA handbook that shows various installation applications, you're going to not only see the ANSI specifications, you're going to start seeing the ISO specifications. We're not going to spend time on that today because that's a whole nother hour-and-a-half presentation, and we won't go over that way, but as you start seeing it, start asking questions, because what it's doing is now it's defining the thin-set mortars by what they do rather than by a classification of what they are. So it helps you as a designer or an architect to specify the correct product for what you want it to do, rather than a broad general field. This is just showing how you're taking a look at curvature on a typical floor with your joists in it. The darker the area, the more deflection you're getting in that, and that's in between your floor joists. So you can see that somebody may tell you, oh, we're not having that much movement across the total floor, but in between the joists there can be a tremendous amount of movement. And so what we have to look at is how do we properly prepare for that type of deflection to making sure that we don't have a point loading failure. So substrate preparation, why? As I mentioned before, a thin set is not intended to be used for truing or leveling. The majority of all flooring installation failures are due to improper subfloor preparation. And that can be as simple as a proper cleaning of the floor. Can't tell you how many times I've gone out to a job site and taking up the floor and they're saying there's something wrong with the thin set, nothing's sticking. And there's so much dust, paint, other debris, cigarette butts I found underneath tile installations, and they're asking, well, why isn't the thin set sticking? Well, we have to start with something clean to make sure that it's sticking. And subfloor preparation is a major part of that. Every type of flooring installation requires some type of preparation. So as you're working with your end user, and no matter how good the concrete guy tells you he is and what he can do with this concrete, I promise you there's going to have to be some sort of surface preparation. Work something into the overall price. Work something in that, hey, we are going to have to do some things here. We know that going in. So that when we're done, it doesn't become the add-on or the extra that the end user is complaining about, why is this extra charge, but rather it was planned for in advance. As we look at these larger format tiles and stones, we start looking at what is called, by definition, a medium bed mortar. Some mortar buildup is always required with a heavier, larger format tile. It's not to be used for surface correction, but rather to support the weight of the tile. Projects are not always specified with elevation for a traditional mortar bed. So in other words, we're not going in and doing 1.5 inches of mortar before we're bonding the tile to it, because there's not room on the job. And that was the way things were done years ago. The medium beds are designed to help support the increased weight of the larger formats. They're also formulated to reduce mortar shrinkage. They'll help reduce the lippage, which means reducing crack tiles or bond failure. And by using a medium bed, we can adjust for the varying stone thicknesses. A natural stone, for example, you may take a granite and a marble, or a granite and a piece of slate, and you're mixing them together and you've got different thicknesses you're playing around with. So by using a medium bed, the installer can work with that in making sure that the tiles end up as a flat, level installation. Stone versus tile, installation factors. If you're using a natural stone, your substrate deflection is more critical. On a tile, we're looking at L over 360. On a stone, we're looking at L over 720. The effects of curvature on the entire stone installation is that stone being softer traditionally, more veining and such in it, the more the chance of movement, the more there is a chance of the tile breaking down, cracking, or coming apart. Expansion plays a larger part of a natural stone environment. Typically, natural stone will have more expansion than a porcelain product. Then your dimensional stability. Some of your natural stones are more susceptible to efflorescence They're more susceptible to moisture. And when we go into installing them, we can't use a traditional thin set, but in some cases we have to use an epoxy or a urethane. To determine if a stone is dimensionally stable, they actually do a test on a machine called the Gabriella machine. And this measures how much movement will happen in the tile when it's subjected to water. And this just shows a couple of the shots of the machine and measuring the movement on this. Moving away from the tile side of it, we're going to step into glass. When I started in the tile industry 30-some years ago, glass, all I saw it as was 1 inch by 1 inch squares, the 3/4 inch squares. And the way it was installed is that they would put up a mortar bed onto a wall. They would then take mortar and comb the sheet of glass mosaics, place that onto the wall, adjust it, beat it into place, let it take its initial set, and then they would wash the paper. It was always mounted on a paper. They would wash that off and dress out the grout joints. They wouldn't grout it. This mortar would come through and act as a grout. Well, there were 3 things holding that installation together: God, grout, and gravity. Cement doesn't stick to glass. Okay? What ended up happening is that the mortar encapsulated itself around the little pieces of glass, holding it into place. If you go and try to chisel that off, you can get the glass off pretty much clean because the cement doesn't stick to it. Now the problem is the industry, we've started seeing some changes in it. And we've moved from the small mosaic into larger and larger pieces of glass with different backings, different sizes, different reactions to heat and cold. And consequently, the 3 Gs don't work. There's not enough grout joints to hold it into place. Gravity is working against it, pulling it down off the wall, and God wants nothing to do with this installation. So we have to look at a system that will properly install the glass tiles. We're seeing the use of glass in, oh my gosh, simple things from backsplashes, with, behind a granite or above a granite counter or tile or stone counter, showers, swimming pools, floors. The areas of glass tile, I mean, anywhere, just about anywhere. And it's a very beautiful medium to be working with because of the colors, the designs, and such like that. Currently, the TCNA only addresses glass tiles up to a 3 inch by 3 inch. The reason being is that there's so many different ways of manufacturing that there's a lot of variables going on. So again, when you're working with a larger formats of glass tile, talk to the supplier. Find out what he knows about the amount of expansion that's going to happen with that glass, how much movement it'll have, how it's going to be affected by different things. What's the backing on it? How is that backing bonded to it so that you end up specifying the right type of mortar, or in some cases, an epoxy to hold it into place. The most critical thing about glass is the fact that a beautiful glass tile works when light goes through it, reflects off of it, and brings out the color of the glass. That's what we're looking for. That's the jump, the snap, the pizzazz, that's what we want. And so consequently, what we want in order to make that punch through is a very white background. And what is white? I ran into a law case a couple of years ago where we were getting sued over what is white on a glass tile installation. And it came down to, we could look at the Miele sign, we could look at a piece of newspaper, we could look at the white in my shirt. They're all white, but what brightness are we looking for? Similarly in a glass tile installation, you'll go into a showroom and you'll look at a beautiful mock-up model. Your customer is looking at it. Everybody decides, this is what I want. You tell the installer, this is the glass tile. He doesn't question it any further. He installs it. Everybody's upset. Did he do something wrong? No. Who made the error? Didn't specify which thin set was used for this display to make sure that we're using the same thin set for the application to getting that reflective quality. So it's very critical that when you're looking at this and you're looking at that sample, ask them if that's the look you're after. Make sure that's the same thin set you're going to use on the job. That's your responsibility. making sure that your client is well informed over that so you don't have that called back. The other thing to be aware of on a glass tile installation is that they get full coverage. Typically on a tile installation, the industry calls out that the tile installation for a commercial application has to be 95% coverage on the back of the tile. That means if you lift up the tile, you're not supposed to see any trowel marks. If you see trowel marks, that means you've got probably about 45% coverage. On a residential installation, it should be 85%. If that happens with a glass tile, you're going to see voids of thinset behind the glass, which will reflect the light differently, which will show up as gray or an off color. So when they're doing a proper glass tile installation, typically what they'll do is they'll spread their thinset to get it the right depth. They'll flat trowel the back of it to flatten it out, and they'll put coating on the back of the tile to making sure there are no voids. They're placing that into it. There are no air pockets behind it. That way you're not going to have any light reflecting through, showing any type of void or empty spot. Yes, sir?
So that coating goes over the...
I'm sorry, say that again?
That coating goes over the adhesive on the tile?
That coating goes over the backing on, if there is a backing on the tile, yes, it would go right onto the backing on that, onto the backing of the tile. Some of those coatings on the back of the tile, you do have to ask how they're bonded. There's a number of different ways that they can go. And I've seen in some cases a traditional thinset will not stick to them. You have to go into an epoxy. And also in some cases, an epoxy might have too much pull and can pull the backing off. So question the manufacturer of the glass tile. Moving along, we're going right into sound control. Very important aspect, especially here in this city. The condos, townhouses, the high-rise projects, that we want to live in an environment where we don't hear our neighbors and we don't want them to hear us. We want to make sure that the sound isn't being transmitted. And what are we going to do? I mean, if we were putting in wall-to-wall carpet everywhere, hey, not much of a problem. It absorbs a lot, takes care of a lot of problems. The thing is that most people are staying away from the wall-to-wall carpet. They want the wood floors, they want the stone floors, they want the porcelain floor, they want the hard surface for cleanliness, for the look, for all of the various other things. But with those floors comes the potential problem of how do we maintain or manage the sound that we're going to create just by the fact that we're living. So there are two types of sound. There's the airborne, which would be like your voice, my voice, which carries everywhere, stereo, vacuum, those types of things, machinery, anything of that nature that putting out a sound that's being transmitted through the air. Then there's the impact sound. The neighbor kids running upstairs, boom, 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 down the hallway, moving furniture, dropping the bowling ball, kicking a ball around the place. An impact sound. In classifying the sounds, in measuring for these sounds, we use two different systems. The STC, which is the sound transmission class, your ASTM numbers on that. But this is the measurement of the ability of the flooring system or underlayment to reduce airborne sound. One of the things I want you to walk away with today, when we're talking about sound control, one of the biggest things I want you to walk away with today is that it's a system. It's not a product, okay? I can show you a piece, I can show you a napkin. This is sound deadening material. Built around the right system, I can give you the rating you want. So when somebody comes in and starts talking to you about a product being a sound rated material, you need to investigate how was it tested, what is the total system that it went over to determine what the rating was. The industry is starting to go into what's called a delta factor. How much does the product add to the total sound deadening? Not everybody is testing that way, but we're slowly starting to see it move that way. So if somebody is showing you what a delta factor is, and they can say that this product will add so many points to the total sound deadening, then you have a basis of some comparison. Otherwise, ask them when they say, here's a sound deadening material, great. What was the system that it was tested on? That's what you need to know.